Sup team, and yep, you read it right, man. He's meant to be Jesus. Deltarune's Jesus. Anyway, that may seem like the single most useless point that anybody's ever come up with in the history of this fanbase, but I think it surprisingly isn't. Besides, that would go to human death theory. Really though, this is probably objectively stupid. I can't deny the stupid, goofy allegations with this one team, but if Ralsei is really meant to parallel Jesus, or at least have a similar role as him in Deltarune, then that could help answer one of our most pressing questions right now. What the heck was up with that final prophecy? So please, I implore you to settle down, grab a snack, but not one with too many crumbs, so you don't get these complimentary shirts I made dirty, and we shall begin. Make sure to subscribe, by the way. That's written in fine print on the tag. Now, you must be thinking, how did I even jump to such a conclusion? And I would honestly ask the same thing, because it seems like I had to have gotten a world record for how far I've jumped here, but please, I can explain. The entire reason I got put onto this train of thought in the first place was because of the beginning of Chapter 4, during the church scene. In specific, Caddy's reading is what really got me thinking. Ignoring the part of the church song where they literally spit a bar about entry 17, but that's probably best for another day. But concerning Caddy's reading, this was my part of interest. There's like these heroes, and they're like so cool. Lazy ass is abridging this part because it's irrelevant. And there's one with like, horns? He's honestly so cute. I mean, there like aren't any pictures, but like, I just imagine him as, like, cute. Call me crazy because I am, but I remember thinking Ralsei's Jesus, bar for bar, the second I finished reading Caddy's sermon. I swear, bar for bar, I thought he was the Holy Son, dog. That is mainly because Ralsei gets so much focus in Caddy's sermon. While this could be chalked up to Caddy only remembering bits and pieces about Ralsei, since she did kind of half-assedly memorize the text, I still think it's more likely that Ralsei had a whole passage dedicated to him in the prophecy's texts. If he was able to stick out so much in Caddy's mind, then there had to have been some kind of focus on him at least. Now, I think we all know about the Holy Bible, and I think we all know about Jesus H. Christ. The one that got nailed to a cross, shoved in a cave, came back 3 days later. The OG aura-pilled hype maxer. Jesus Christ. I'm not even a Christian, but I can glaze such a thing. It's pretty fucking cool. Now, in the Bible, particularly the New Testament, there is obviously a massive focus on Jesus. It's pretty safe to say that at that point he's the main character of the whole Holy Bible. This means that there is naturally a huge emphasis on him in the text. And like I said, even though I'm not a Christian myself, I still remember Jesus' story, at least the core idea. And in that same way, Caddy mostly remembers Ralsei. Of course, she still actively follows the prophecy, but the point still stands. Thus, I believe that it is likely that Ralsei is the main character of the prophecy, in the same vein that Jesus is the main character of the Holy Bible, and that they are given equal emphases in their respective texts. Now, there's another part of Caddy's sermon that caught my eye as well. The fact that there are no official depictions of Ralsei, and Caddy thinks he's cute solely based on her personal mental image of him. In short, to the light world, Ralsei's appearance is up to interpretation, with guesswork based off of vague descriptions in the text. Sound familiar? That is beat for beat what has happened with Jesus through art. Scholars have argued over Jesus' appearance for centuries, with some of them believing him to be unattractive, basing it off of Isaiah 53. He has no form, no glory, no beauty when we beheld him, but his appearance was without honor and inferior to that of the sons of men. While some others go off of Psalm 45, where Jesus may be among the, quote, most handsome of men. So yeah, there's a wide range here of what people think Jesus looks like. The interpretation that I believe to be the most relevant in our case for Ralsei, though, comes from St. Augustine. In the Works of St. Augustine, Part 1, Volume 5. The physical face of the Lord is pictured with an infinite variety by countless imaginations, though whatever it was like, he certainly had only one. This quote perfectly aligns with what Caddy has done here with Ralsei. There's presumably, based off what she says, little to nothing to go off of for his appearance from the text itself, so she has simply imagined what Ralsei looks like. But we know what Ralsei looks like. He only has one real appearance, but the light world, the prophecy's followers, don't know that. So, in short, there are no official depictions of Ralsei, just like how there are none of Jesus, and their respective followers in both religions have filled in the gaps with their own ideas. But wait, hold the phone. Why am I even comparing the prophecy, which I'm just going to call Deltarune's religion the prophecy, because I don't know what else to call it. It might be called Delta Space Rune, but I might be wrong, I low-key forget. But why am I comparing the prophecy to Christianity in the first place? There's no basis for that, especially because Father Alvin states that there is an absence of sin in Hometown's religion, drawing a fine line between the two beliefs. And yes, I do concede. These two religions are not the same, and the lack of sin means there's no good way for me to directly compare the two. The thing is, though, Christianity still exists in the world of Deltarune, objectively. In the same vein that he tells us that Hometown doesn't follow the concept of sin, Alvin describes how Asriel used to confess his sins to him as a child. And at the beginning of Chapter 4, when Susie mentions how eating such a good breakfast at the Dreamer's house is a sin, Toriel mentions that sinning reminds her of church. So it seems that, while the majority of Hometown probably doesn't follow Christian beliefs to a T, the Dreamer belief is the closest to doing so. And the family member who seems to be the most concerned with sin is Asriel. Back then, Asriel would cry to Alvin about dropping Deltarune's equivalent to Yoshi into a pit, for example. Now, that is based off of how Asriel acted as a young child, so, obviously it's dramatized. What the fuck? So obviously it's dramatized because, he was young. But even then, this still happened during his childhood, which are his formative years, meaning that he is likely still concerned with the concept of sin. Now, the fact that Asriel is still concerned with sin is very important for our case today. Because while we can't compare the prophecy and Christianity directly, Asriel can act as the missing link. The one thing that we can go off here. And that is so important, because Asriel is already a parallel to Ralsei as is. Now, I don't think I need to go into super big depth on why Ralsei and Asriel are probably intentionally similar. From Ralsei having Flowey's dialogue in Chapter 1 to their names being literal anagrams of one another, the connection is clear. As of Chapter 4, though, their connection has gotten even more interesting. Going back to that quote from earlier, here is the last part of it that I didn't tell you. What does matter is that we think of him as man. Again, Caddy had a unique image in her mind about how Ralsei looked, which already aligns with St. Augustine's beliefs. Believe it or not, this part of his quote applies to Caddy as well. She not only calls Ralsei cute during the Chapter 4 church reading, but way back in Chapter 1, she calls Asriel cute, linking Asriel and Ralsei in this religious discussion. Because Caddy has this own image of Ralsei in her mind, and she sees him as, basically, as man, like St. Augustine says in that quote. Sees him as Ralsei, who she's also into. In addition, we also have very solid, strong evidence that Ralsei and Asriel are similar down to their physical appearance, with Susie at the start of Chapter 4 thinking that Asriel was a photoshopped picture of Ralsei that Chris hung up on their fridge. And this is actually hinted at way back in Chapter 2, but not confirmed, when Noelle says that Ralsei, quote, looks kind of like... ... While we were never explicitly told who she was thinking of, it was very safe to assume it was Asriel even at the time. But now it's all but confirmed thanks to Susie, and in a way, Caddy. So, considering how similar Asriel and Ralsei are physically, that was basically the whole point of that last part, I believe that's fair to stretch that comparison even further by connecting their actions. From what I remember, though, Ralsei hasn't done anything explicitly Asriel-like yet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this idea to make predictions for Ralsei's future, and to do that, we need to go over Asriel's rule in Undertale. In Undertale, Azrael Dreamer is the final boss of the True Pacifist route, as we all know. He absorbed every single soul in the underground, became a god, and when Frisk saved him, he broke the barrier, freeing all of monsterkind. That means that Azrael is a very important figure in the religion of Undertale, because in Waterfall, there's this quote that can be found on one of the glyphs. However, there is a prophecy. The angel, the one who has seen the surface, they will return, and the underground will go empty. At the end of the True Pacifist route, Azrael obviously lets the underground go empty. This means that, in this case, he was likely Undertale's quote-unquote angel. Of course, candidates for Undertale's angel change depending on the route, like it could be Azrael, could be Kara, could be Frisk, who knows, but for our purposes today, Azrael is Undertale's angel. And, well, what happened to Azrael? He ventured out onto the surface, humanity thought he was terrifying and or disgusting, killed him, when he was only trying to bring Kara's body up to their village. Upon turning to dust back in the underground, he became a symbol that not only the royalty, but the entire underground wanted to fight for. At the end of the game, though, he comes back and frees the underground as foretold. Now, of course, that's with the help of Frisk, but still. So, Azrael was falsely accused of a misdeed, killed for it based off of who he was, sparked a message throughout the underground, and likely even became the cornerstone of their religion before coming back and saving all of monsterkind. Sound familiar? Yep. Not only is Ralsei Deltarune's Jesus, but Azrael is already likely to be Undertale's Jesus. By the way, I'm kind of throwing around Jesus' name here. Probably counts as saying his name in vain, but like I said, I'm not a Christian. But I don't mean it literally, obviously. I just mean they share similar rules in their stories, and I think it's fair for analysis. Just keep that in mind. I'm not actually calling him Jesus. It's a joke. It's a joke. It makes for a great title. As mentioned earlier, we can safely connect Azrael to Ralsei for a variety of reasons, meaning that their stories might end up being very similar as well. So I believe we can use what happened to Azrael in Undertale, including at the end of the True Pacifist route, to predict what will happen to Ralsei in Deltarune. Now, if you've watched We Were Right in 2018, which is one of my previous videos on Deltarune, you might already know where I'm going with this. Azrael's role in Undertale, when we connect it to Ralsei, may help us explain that final damn prophecy. To save the world, there is only one way. The world will have to be saved in Deltarune's ending, and it will be enabled by a tragedy as confirmed by prophecies prior. You know who else's story involved a tragedy that eventually enables them to save the world? You know who Susie says will especially not let the very bad thing from the final prophecy unfold, meaning that it likely affects them the most? Yeah. Ralsei's sacrificing himself to save the world of Deltarune. Just like Azrael and just like Jesus H. Christ. Jesus H. Christ on a popsicle stick, dare I say. Ralsei is Jesus. Yup, the whole thing was to fulfill an idea that I had, I think, a few months ago. Self-fulfilling, I know, but it's fun. But it's fun! I think it just adds up pretty nicely. Of course, I'm not saying that I want the prophecy of Deltarune to end beat for beat like Undertale's pacifist route, because that would be really boring. Like, Deltarune's obviously going to parallel Undertale in some way, but that's just boring. But I'm just saying, we have a triple reach-around parallel here with Azrael, Ralsei, and Jesus that I think was very useful for our analysis. I hope any of that made sense. Seriously, low-key, usually I kind of just go off the cuff, but this one and the last video, very, very scripted, even if it might not seem like it. So, yeah, tell me what I can do better. But anyway, before wrapping things up here, I want to go over some counterpoints for who Deltarune's Jesus role, character, person could be. First off, Noelle. Obviously, she's related to Christmas, like her name literally means Christmas holiday. Giga Queen also fucking crucifies her on a big hand, and her Dark World appearance involves angelic-looking robes, and there's tons of things pointing to her being the angel. And if Azrael was the angel in Undertale, or if Azrael is Jesus, that means Noelle is Jesus! Right? She even gets the thorn ring, which parallels the crown of thorns that Jesus wore upon the cross. But honestly, in the modern age, I don't think Noelle Jesus makes much sense anymore. Now, the idea that Noelle was Jesus, or really that Noelle was the angel, made a lot more sense in Chapter 2, because, like, every single thing we knew about the angel kind of pointed toward Noelle. What with her having an angel costume as a child, what with her, like, jumping out the Ferris wheel and growing angel wings, that's what she wants to do with Susie. But now with Chapter 4, I just think there's a lot stronger evidence for Player Angel. Considering the whole holiday house dress-up fiasco and the angel's prophecy letting us see ourselves in the reflection. I can't lie, while writing this, I can't really remember the nitty-gritty of Player Angel before Chapter 4, but I just personally subscribe to it over Noelle Angel. But that begs the question, are we Deltarune's Jesus? Am I Jesus? I hope not, because my hands hurt enough from typing the script as is. Next up, Gaster Jesus. What a title that would be. Gaster Wing Jesus. If I remember correctly, and please tell me if there's more, the biggest pieces of evidence for Gaster Jesus are that he's referred to as him, in the same vein that God is referred to as him in the Bible with a capital H, and that Gaster having holes in his hands could symbolize Jesus' hands being nailed to the cross. Again, if there's more Gaster Angel things, please let me know, because I really can't remember. That probably sounds really bad and unqualified since I'm saying this for a counterpoint, but it's fairly clear that Gaster has a lot more ties to actually Satan than Jesus, because there's sixes, lots and lots of sixes, but no sevens! Gaster might be a Diddy blood! No, but really, need I say more? I think we all know that Gaster's battle stats are 6s and 6s and 6s. The freaking bunker is Gaster's team sped up by 666%. He's the devil, bro. Which, honestly, I might make another video about that now that I'm thinking about it, so stay tuned. Basically, Blood's probably just meant to be the polar opposite of Deltarune's Jesus. And with that, I think we've done it. We have backed up the final prophecy being about Ralsei sacrificing himself for the greater good by comparing him to Jesus for some reason. But does this mean Ralsei will have a good or bad ending? That depends on how late in the story he sacrifices himself. If his sacrifice is like the ending of the whole game or something, then obviously it's a bad ending for him, but if his sacrifice happens around Chapter 6, or maybe even Chapter 5, then we would have time to see that tragedy unfold, and like see it through. Maybe Ralsei, like Jesus, could come back after sacrificing himself for the sake of the world? I mean, I really, really hope so. While I am a Ralsei Final Prophecy truther, I still really want a happy ending for the guy, because he deserves no less. He's been through so much. Poor little dude. But whatever happens will happen. But let it be known that I fully believe that Final Prophecy is about Ralsei. If you want more of why, again, go watch We Were Right in 2018. I talked about it there, I think, toward the end of the video, if I remember right. It's been a few months. So, yeah. He's Jesus, you're Jesus, I'm Jesus! Are there any other Jesuses I should know about? Ralsei's Jesus. I have this one on the back burner for a long time. Honestly, I think it's pretty overdue. If you enjoy my crazy ramblings and or just want to see more, make sure to subscribe and flick the little bell that I left on the counter. And only if you really want to, consider becoming a channel member for $2.99. That is $2.99 USD. I will give you early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, and shout-outs at the ends of videos when applicable. But, like, seriously, no pressure. I try to make it affordable and worth it, because a lot of people's shit is expensive, and it's like, I don't care that much. I wouldn't pay for that. But I try to make it something I would pay for. So, yeah, no pressure, but just, that's there. So, alright, that's all I got. If you got this far, what should you comment this time? Last time was Shadow Crystal. Comment Doobie. Because we are reviving Ralsei smoking a fat blunt with this one. Thanks for watching, team. Sayonara.